Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I am Evelyn Gardner. Open Door has been my church home for over 20 years. This morning, I want to share with you about God's grace, His unending love, His protection, and His relentless pursuit. John 10:10 tells us that Satan comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy, but that Jesus comes to save, to restore, and to give life. My Bible, the New King James, puts it this way: the thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. I wish I had known this verse 30 years ago. It might have saved me from many years of wandering through the proverbial desert, thirsting for something, but not knowing what that was. I was raised Catholic, so I always knew about God and Jesus, but I didn't mature into having a personal relationship with Him. By the time I had met and married my husband, I had quit going to church altogether. It wasn't long before I realized that my husband was an alcoholic. And by that time, we had our son, and the verbal abuse started. I just thought that it was all my fault. If I were a better wife, a better mother, a better housekeeper, made more money, and on, that the outbursts would stop, and my husband would be happy. But the outbursts didn't stop. Instead, he became physically abusive. So I tried even harder. I exhausted myself physically and mentally trying to figure out and to avoid his triggers. He ultimately committed suicide. He called me on the phone and he shot himself so that I would hear it and that I would know. I was 26 years old and my son was 4. I felt like I had pulled that trigger myself. It was my fault. If only I had been a better wife, a better mother, a better housekeeper, made more money, he wouldn't have done what he did. The guilt and the shame consumed me. Remember Satan's plan in John 10:10? His plan is to break you and to destroy you, and I was certainly broken and destroyed. But I did not know how to turn to God, and besides, even if I did, He wouldn't want me. I was too guilty, too ashamed, too ugly, and too awful. The first Easter after he died, his sister invited me to church with her. It was the first time that I heard something in church that really meant something to me personally. I was hooked, but I was also ashamed to be there. You're supposed to come away from a sermon feeling good or feeling convicted to be better. I came away every Sunday feeling even more depressed. But even through all that, I kept going back Sunday after Sunday. I was still hiding from God in plain sight, and from everyone else too. I couldn't let anyone get close to me. I was too guilty, too ashamed, too ugly, and too awful. And I certainly couldn't let myself get too close to God. He would have seen me for what I really was, and the condemnation would have been too much for me to bear. I can look back on that time now and see that God was pursuing me through those years. He had His hand of protection on my son and I through the darkness. I had started sleeping as an escape. My son was 5 years old, and so many things could have happened to him while I was checked out physically, emotionally, and mentally. But God's hand of protection was there. My son Curtis accepted Jesus when he was 8. I attended his pre-baptism classes with him, hoping to learn more about this personal relationship with Jesus that had become so important to my 8-year-old son. Even so, it was another year before I finally accepted Christ and was baptized. But I was still not whole, and I was still not healed. Eventually, I remarried. My husband used Scripture as a sword, cutting me with words and verses that I didn't know how to defend. And since I didn't know how to defend myself, I still held people and God at arm's length. I never let anyone get too close. I was too guilty, too ashamed, too ugly, and too awful. Our marriage disintegrated and ended in divorce after 12 years, and all my feelings of being a failure intensified. I threw myself into being a good mom, a good employee, and a good church attender, but I still didn't know how to be a good Christian. I have, over the past few years, apologized to some of you for those years when I held everyone at arm's length, for being standoffish, for putting up walls, for coming across as snobbish. And today, I hope that we as Christians know that when someone acts like that, there's likely fear behind that wall. Fear of being found out, of all the guilt, all the shame, all the ugliness, and all the awfulness. But Jesus never turned his back on me. He didn't run from my guilt or my shame or my ugliness or my awfulness. He stood behind me with his arms open, calling my name, waiting for me to turn around and run into his embrace. I am forever grateful to friends and family who did not turn their backs on me, even when I pushed them away and held them at arm's length. I am forever grateful to my sister-in-law Cheryl for extending the invitation that put me on the path to salvation at Pleasant Valley Baptist Church. I am forever grateful to my brother Kevin and his wife Tammy for introducing me to Open Door Baptist Church. I am forever grateful to Don and Sharon Wilson for, well, they know what for. I am forever grateful to my husband Thurman, who provided me with a safe, accepting, and loving relationship in which I could truly and finally heal. And I am forever grateful, humbled, and awed by our God, who in his abundant grace and mercy had his hand of protection on me, pursued me with his relentless and unending love, and accepted me, even when I was too guilty, too ashamed, too ugly, and too awful.